I'd like to now turn our attention to disturbance and how to bring that into the whole mix. I like using disturbance for the really small details. A lot of the mid-size to large-size details, we're just going to get from substeps and sourcing. However, the really tiny little bits of detail along here is great for disturbance. Also, notice how wispy the density gets down here towards the bottom left. And that sort of wispiness, or that almost fog-like characteristic, is really good for, let's say, the continuous disturbance. And so if you want to add a little bit of continuous disturbance, that might be good for the areas of density that are really, really low in value. So we could also potentially layer that in as well. But I'm primarily going to try to add detail to the edges of this plume. I've found that using the speed field is actually pretty good when it comes to adding this disturbance. So let's check out how to do that. As always, we want to isolate this effect as we work on it. So I'm going to bypass this custom wind that we just made and create a gas disturbance, or gas disturb, that is. Also, we kind of have a large network going on at this point. I think it makes sense for us to keep all of our vortical stuff over here and then all of our normal gas microsolvers over here. So let's just keep ourselves somewhat organized as we go along and turn this into a light green, which is right there. Okay, so for this disturbance, we'll call this our small detail block disturb. So bring that over like so. And we want to set this to block based. I'm going for the areas that are based on speed. So first of all, we need speed. And to do that, on the Pyro solver, you can go to simulation and check on this calculate speed field. However, as I do that, if we go to frame 2, we don't actually have a container. So it's a little bit silly in that regard. That means I'm going to our smoke object to do a little bit of surgery here. Let's make a copy of this scalar field and call this our speed. So that's going to be speed. The data name is speed. Great. Let's also take a copy of the visualizer and plug that in. Get rid of all of these different channels here. So that's Control-Shift-Click. I do not want to use smoke. I want to use a plane when sampling these values. I do not want to use black body. I want to use infrared. And our guide range is going to be from 0 to about 60. Also go to the very top and check on the show guide geometry. As soon as we have all that, we plug that in, go back to the .NET. We can see that, yes, in fact, speed does now have a container, which is great. And if we go to frame 30, let's see if that plane is showing up. And sure enough, it is. So these red areas right now are hitting a value of 60, and that goes all the way down into the blues. That means back on our disturbance, we can use these values to mask off where that disturbance happens. So under the control here, I want to say use the speed as the control field. And the range is going to be 0 to 30. Once we hit 30, that means we are getting the full effect that we specify right here. And I'm going less than the 60. I'm going about half of that, simply because this is not going to be a velocity of, or a speed of 60 for most of the simulation. It's really just this beginning here where things are going to be really fast. So anyway, we have that going on. Let's take the strength here to, I don't know, 50 to start. And then let's also check on what size we want to use. So back here to our Pyro Bake, go forward a few frames, and when in doubt, sphere it out. So again, I'm trying to go for values that are really small here. I'm going for those details. So if I bring the sphere next to a plume like that, and I do 0.1, that looks like this, which I think is just about right. So 0.1 is going to be that small detail size. Maybe we do this at 0.1, and then maybe we can also do another one at 0.3. And that would be that size right there. But I do think that 0.1 is about what we're after primarily. So back on this disturb here. Block size, 0.1. Roughness, up a tad bit. Let's also perhaps visualize the strength, and then we'll go forward a few frames. Okay, so here is the strength. It looks like we are cranking away at some high values here. So there's the value of 50. Looks like on our visualization, our guide here, again, it hits 50 and then it starts capping out. So that's pretty good. Also, let's go back to our smoke object and turn off our speed plane. There we go. Okay, so I think that that's pretty cool. Let's see what that actually looks like though in SOPs real fast. So there's frame 31, 32. We might need to go up on this a little bit to actually see it. And also realize that I'm at a 0.1 voxel size. So you might not see this detail really come through until I go lower on that. So just to test this out, I'm going to go back here to our DOPNet and change our smoke object to 0.05, and let's see if we can start seeing that effect come through. Truth be told, it's difficult to tell what this is doing. This is the old non-disturbed version at 0.05, and this is with the disturb. So that's with disturb, without. Again, it's really hard to tell. So let's go back to our DOPNet and give it a bit more juice. About double, actually. So we'll do a double shot here of the strength at 100. Also, be sure that this threshold range is turned off. Okay, cool. Let's see what that does now. And at a value of 100, we start noticing those details shine through a little bit. So I think 100 will do just fine. That is pretty much what I'm after right there. And what we can also do is throw in a continuous disturbance. So as you know from watching my other courses, you can always pile on different size disturbances. So we can go here and basically have the same exact thing, except this guy maybe is a 0.2 as an example. And if we do this one more time here, let's set this to continuous, which again gives us that really fine, powdery kind of look. And I won't set the strength to 100. Let's say the strength's at 20, and we're going to use density as our control field. So let's have our control range from 0 to 1. And what I'll say is that as the smoke gets closer and closer towards 0, then add more of that fuzzy disturbance. And then if anything is 1 or above, then don't do anything at all. So that's what that is doing right there. And once we add these two guys in, let's see what the result is. And now finally, with all those effects put together, we end up with this. And well, we're adding so much fine detail that it's kind of difficult to actually see where all that's happening. But it is there. It'll show up in the render eventually. And I think for now, that's going to be some good disturbance settings to get us going. One more thing, we could also add some turbulence if you like. If you do that, then I like adding turbulence with speed, because kind of going back to that whole wind idea, I like our vortical setup for wind better, but sometimes a little bit of that chaos is nice in the direction of the velocity as things are moving fast. So you can always add a gas turbulence and set that over to speed. For right now, I'm going to pass on that. However, you can go ahead and add that to yours if you'd like. And I'd like to move on to some other stuff. So for right now, that does it for microsolvers. And just to show you guys what this looks like when it's all said and done with the vorticals and the microsolvers that we have so far, it looks like this, which is pretty awesome in my opinion. I mean, in my humble completely selfless opinion, this is amazing. But here's the thing too, once we get to this level of detail, the viewport can't really keep up. So let's also send out a test render to make sure that those little things are actually showing through. Now I'll get to rendering later on here, so we'll talk about shading and all kinds of fun stuff. But I just want to look at the details, the shapes that we're getting. If we compare this to reference, we are pretty darn close to what we see right here. If I put these guys next to each other, it's very, very similar. We do have some areas that are kind of getting a little bit soft and I guess fluffy around there, but the same thing happens in reference to a pretty similar extent. So that being said, these shapes are definitely going on, especially in areas like this, like that, and I think that this is working out pretty well so far. But I think it's time that we move on to some new techniques that I haven't shown you yet. We'll check that out in the next video.